Hi everyone. I did my presentation on the feminist perspective on free will. And the feminists that I've mentioned are Jean Grimshaw, Kate Millett, Mary Daly, and Marilyn Frye. So I'll start off by talking about Jean Grimshaw. She was an incredibly important feminist who questioned Aristotle's notion on external and internal constraints. Aristotle, as many of you know, believes that views that come from within oneself are autonomous and based on free will. His view is that unfree and involuntary choices are therefore a result of external constraints. Grimshaw, on the other hand, argues that the world is not as black and white as Aristotle says it is. Instead, all desires that come from within are not one's own because psychic coercion plays a significant role in shaping human desires, and therefore, intrinsic desires are not necessarily free and autonomous. According to Grimshaw, psychic coercion compromises intrinsic autonomy and thereby limits personal freedom. And she goes on to explain that for centuries, women have been conditioned, brainwashed, and indoctrinated into submission by men. And male domination has taken control of female selves, and women are therefore unable to act autonomously because every essence of their being is controlled. And therefore she states that the female self under male domination is riddled through and through with false or conditioned desires. And Kate Millett, she's the second second feminist that I've listed, and her views are very similar to Bradshaw's. Her most famous publication is her PhD dissertation, Sexual Politics, which was published in 1970. And in it, she strongly critiques patriarchal societies in the Western world and in Western literature. And she also goes on to explain that patriarchal societies have invaded the female self. And according to Millett, female oppression was culturally and politically based, and she feels that the only way that women can undo, or the only way to free women is to undo the stereotypical gender roles that are found within the traditional family. So she feels that, by allowing a woman to go out and work and having her husband stay at home to care for the children, by doing something like that, then a woman will gain freedom. And that is the only way that a woman can gain freedom, according to Millett. And Millett emerged as one of the main faces of the women's liberation movement and was featured on the cover of Time magazine on August 31st, 1970. So she became quite an influential feminist. Mary Daly is the third feminist that I've listed in my presentation. She was born in 1928 and is most famous for her novel Gin/Ecology, which was published in 1979, and it describes the brutal abuse that women have endured over the years. She has included things like foot binding and clitorectomy, and Like the other feminists, she feels that women have been conditioned by their patriarchal societies to such an extent that they have been moralized, robotized, lobotomized, puppets of Papa. And at some instances, Daly feels that women are so brainwashed that they're barely human, and she describes them as fembots and mutants. So Mary Daly is one of the, I'd say, most extreme or radical feminists. The fourth feminist that I've listed is the philosopher and professor Marilyn Frye. And she writes of patriarchal societies in The Politics of Reality, which was published in 1983. And in it, she describes a young girl who was sold as a sex slave and then continually beaten, brutalized, brainwashed into serving her captors. And she uses this as an analogy for the situation which all women in society find themselves in. And Frye also states that although victims like this girl made their own autonomous decisions to serve their captors, their decisions aren't really free, and are instead the result of psychic coercion. And according to Frye, the captor strives to achieve disintegration and misintegration of the victim, to accomplish the detachment of the victim's will and intelligence from the victim's own interests and their attachment to the interests of the exploiter. And I found that all of these feminists that I've discussed, their views are very similar to those of hard determinist Baron de Holbach. And they do, although they maybe, they don't mention it literally, they certainly do seem to believe that free will is an illusion. Because, as they've mentioned, all autonomous decisions that women make aren't necessarily autonomous because they're influenced by prior, by men and prior experiences that they've had. Baron de Holbach, he says that circumstances and motivations drive experiences because they're embedded in one's memory. Similarly, views of men remain embedded in women's minds who act according to male desires instead of their own. So, their views are very, very similar to the determinist philosophy. And so the video clips that I've included, the first one is about the movie Mona Lisa Smile, which features Julia Roberts and Kirsten Dunst. And it's set at Wellesley College in the 1950s. And Wellesley College was created as one of the original 7 sister colleges. It was created to rival the Ivy League colleges that men were only allowed to attend. And Catherine Watson, she's a progressive and liberal art history teacher who arrives at the college from California. And she introduces the students to progressive ideas through contemporary art in an attempt to challenge their perceived gender roles and to demonstrate that women do have choices. She, however, receives a great deal of resentment and criticism from her female students who feel that they shouldn't be taught the material that she's been teaching them. They should be adhering to the gender roles that they were born to fill, which is quite interesting because they're actually being sexist towards themselves. And the women at the college, or the students at the college, they also don't pursue an education as a means to a career. Instead, they pursue an education to be more suitable for the marriage market, which is pretty interesting. Education is definitely not that way today, and I couldn't imagine getting an education just to please my husband. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous to spend 4 years at a college and then do nothing with your education except be a housewife for the rest of your life. So I thought it was pretty interesting, and I've included a clip from that movie, and it's where actually Catherine Watson, their art history teacher, it's from one of her lectures where she challenges the students and shows them advertisements from various magazines that are very, very sexist, and she questions them and asks them, is this really what you want to do for the rest of your life? Is this what makes you happy? And the other clips that I've included are another YouTube video that I found that a student had made about various movies that include sexism and feminism. And the third was just a YouTube video with Mary Daly quotes. So I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. If I forgot to cover something, you can, I'm sure you can find it in my paper that I've attached. So anyways, thank you for listening to my presentation.